make a note of all of those things where you felt the juice was worth the squeeze in life, and then look for the common thread in that. And it's really interesting exercise to do. And sometimes it won't be till even weeks later you suddenly think, oh, I know what it was.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get going. Paul, it is an absolute honor to have you here, and I have been looking forward to this chat for a few weeks now. So thank you for being here. Just for all the people listening who don't know you, just give us a little bit about yourself, where you are today.
Oh, where I am today, I am in Kent in England. And as we were saying earlier, it's already dark here, so it's later in the evening. Yeah, in terms of what I'm doing, I've got a company called People Alchemy, and we've got a software platform for learning, and I do a bunch of consultancy, and I've written some books and various bits and pieces. So yeah, keep myself busy.
Yeah. Yes, that's wonderful. You've done so much in the L&D space, and we will absolutely get there. I always love to start, and it's the best part for me to go back in time all the way to like your first job. Like, what was your first paying job that you ever had?
Um, Chipping thistles for the neighbour on the neighbour's farm.
Okay, tell
That's
us,
that's
yeah,
with a
tell us
hoe
more.
and just basically grubbing out weeds, I suppose, is the easiest way to say that. And wandering over the hillside with a hoe, grubbing out these thistles on the hillsides.
Oh wow, that's fascinating. So, where were you living that was a neighbor? So you lived
I
next
was in
to
New
a farm, or
Zealand.
you were also on a farm?
Yeah, yeah, no, that was in New Zealand. So yeah,
Okay,
so I'm just a simple farm boy from New Zealand. That's really my background. And
nice. What did you farm?
it was a mixture of mostly sheep,
Okay.
but some cattle, a bit of grain, so a bit of a mixture, but mostly sheep. And we had wild goats in the bush, and we had even a flock of peacocks in the bush of all things, strangely enough.
Wow, wow, that's
The
gorgeous.
neighbors sold their farm and they had some pet peacocks. And when they sold the farm, they walked out and just opened the door on their aviary, and the peacocks left and went up into the bush, came
Oh,
onto our property, and then started breeding. So
okay. Wow,
we
that's fascinating.
had a flock of peacocks in the bush.
Wow, that's so wild. Like, or they like.
Oh no, yeah, no, thoroughly wild. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay. Wow. Wow, that's awesome. How gorgeous. I love peacocks. Okay, so and just because I know a little bit about sheep, because my husband also grew up on a farm. He's a farm boy from South Africa, actually. And they farmed with sheep for a bit. So can you tell me a story of farming with sheep that might be funny?
Oh, I don't know. Well, one thing I never learned to shear a sheep. And I decided that wasn't a good idea because if I knew how to do it, I'd be asked to do it.
So you were
So
wise,
I
wise.
purposely never learned to shear a sheep. So
That's awesome. That's yeah, that is very wise as a young boy. Yeah, because my husband says farming with sheep is was the hardest thing. He says sheep are assholes apparently. So
it's a tough gig. It's a tough
yeah,
gig.
yeah, yeah. So yes, it's not an easy thing. So they look all nice and woolly and cuddly, but apparently they're not. I don't know sheep that well, but so okay. So from there, so you grew up on this farm in New Zealand. So what happened next for you? Was that during school that you were working at the neighbor's farm
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay,
That was like I don't know, 10 years old or something.
okay,
That was
okay.
um yeah, and carried on school, university, left, bummed around for a while, went back to university, got an engineering degree. So that was really what I got into in those days was engineering.
Okay, okay. So, and that was still in New Zealand. Right? You
Yes.
hadn't moved yet. Okay. So, what was your first, we can call it professional job after your engineering degree?
I work with an agricultural machinery manufacturer designing agricultural machinery, seed drills, and
Mm,
chisel plows and all sorts of stuff for the farm. And that it was one of the bigger companies in New Zealand, and they exported to quite a few places around the world, particularly South America.
okay.
And I was actually quite gobsmacked when I was later, many, many years later, on a bus in South America driving along, and I saw one of the seed drills I had designed in a farming used equipment lot on the side of the road. And I said, "Oh, that's one of mine," you know.
That's very
Quite
cool.
amazing quite
Yeah.
amazing to see it. And this must have been, oh, I don't know, 15 years after I'd been working there. So
Mm. Oh, wow. How did that feel?
it was kind of weird and a certain amount of pride, I suppose, and the fact
Yeah.
that it was still there and able to be sold secondhand. So it
Yes.
was still working, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Wow. I can only imagine how that must feel because even just seeing like training material you develop like being used in the, work environments, like, oh, I did that. So
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
I get that a little bit. But that's very cool that your machines are being used 15 years later across the world. I mean, that's
Mhm.
amazing. Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, so from there, because like I know you've, moved away from New Zealand. So first out of college job, how long did you work there? Building.
Yeah, a couple of years, and then I started traveling. I mean, as many Kiwis do, you sort of head out into the
Mm,
world and go and have a wander around. So I
yes,
wandered
yes.
around the world then for many,
That's
many years.
nice. Oh, so you've got to dig deeper there. So where did you go? What were some of your favorite parts? What were some of your hard parts? Tell us some stories.
People say, "What's your favorite part of the world?" I have traveled fairly extensively compared to many people, and I never really have an answer for that because it depends what mood I'm in at the time as to where I would choose to go back to if I could instantly teleport there. There are some places that, like an ocean or a desert or a jungle but I tend to prefer the wilder places
Mm.
than the civilized places, let's put it that way.
Okay, so what's the wildest place you've visited?
Um, well, I've been, wandered around the wilds of Africa and considerably and also parts of South America, as I mentioned earlier. And yeah, across the Sahara 3 times. So that's
Wow.
and
Wow,
I
that's
worked with an
incredible.
overland expedition company for a while, and that was for several years, and that got me out and about in all sorts of amazing places. So,
Wow. Wow. What were some of the best things you've seen? Because that is on my bucket list for sure. I'm like, oh, gotta tell me more.
sorry, what do you mean on your bucket list? What? And being in the Sahara?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, the weirdest thing, I suppose, a flood in the
Oh,
middle of the Sahara, and that
wow.
was quite startling.
Yeah.
We were in a huge four-wheel drive truck, and I was driving through wadis and riverbeds with like 4 feet of water in them, and they're normally dry.
Yes, yes.
And it's startling what happens after there's rain in the desert when it very seldom rains there.
Mm.
I also got snowed on in the middle of the Sahara. Uh,
Wow.
yeah,
I wouldn't have guessed that.
there's a mountainous area in the middle of the Sahara and around near a very small town called Tamanrasset in Algeria. And there's an area of volcanic chimneys there. They call them the Mountains of the Moon because they look so startling and weird and alien-like. And you go up there, you're at about I can't remember how high, but it's reasonably high. And we were
Mm.
up there, and it was snowing. The snowflakes falling on your clothing. You could
Mm.
see them. They weren't
Oh, wow.
weren't sitting on the ground, but it was cold enough to snow.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's
And it's a very weird thing that, and when you're in the middle of the Sahara.
Yes, that is, yeah. I would never have guessed, that out of all the stories I would imagine. But oh, that's amazing. I think we could talk about this all day. It's,
People think
yeah.
of big sand ergs, the big dunes
Mhm.
and things, and yes, they exist, but
Yeah.
generally you don't travel there because they're very tough to travel in, unless you've got
Okay.
a lot of camels. But if you're in vehicles, you need to stay away from them
Okay.
typically.
Okay. Okay.
So it's more gravel and flat, and But
Mm,
it is amazing, the clarity of the air,
mm.
uh, the lack of sound if there's no wind,
Yeah. Yeah.
and particularly the way the sky changes color of an evening. If you go up on a sand dune and sit there and you can just watch the evening arrive.
Oh, wow.
And it's, yeah, the colors change very gradually. It's very pastel colors, and it's actually amazing that. And then you get these little pinpricks of light, called stars. They come out. If it's really quiet, you can hear them sing.
Oh. Oh my gosh, it sounds magical. Like now I'd have to go sooner rather than later. That sounds amazing. So you did that for, you said 7 years?
Not seven. I
No,
was about
both.
4.5 years
Okay,
doing that
okay,
kind of overland expedition stuff around all sorts of different places. And
okay. So
yeah,
you were the guide. You weren't,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. It was more or less, yeah.
Okay, wow, amazing. That is so cool. I'm sure you have just amazing memories from that. That is so from engineering to living base. I mean, you were living there for 4 years, right? 4.5 years living
Mhm.
in the Sahara. Is that right?
No, no, it was
Oh,
all
like
different
you'd go
parts of the
out.
world. We
Okay,
did
okay,
trans-Saharan trips for, so I did, as I said, cross the Sahara 3 times.
okay,
London,
okay.
an expedition from London to Nairobi, for example, and then maybe further on, further south.
Okay.
Also did them across into the east, so London, Kathmandu trips across that way. We've
Okay.
been there through Iran twice during the Iraq-Iran war, and that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
And yeah, and yeah, lots of different things.
Mm.
Went up and did trips up into the Himalayas, so also across the Karakoram ranges 8 times actually, from Pakistan up over into China.
Wow, I can literally talk to you all day about this. So let's move on before I get caught up. So okay, so that's 4.5 years of your life. And then what made you change and do something different after
I
that?
think that's an interesting question. I think when I first started doing that job, I personally was changing a lot because there was so much new I had to deal with.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this kind of relates to learning and development stuff in a way, is we change and learn when we encounter and need to handle different things.
Hmm.
If every day we're handling more or less the same thing, there's not really much room for growth there. And I think I'd got to the point where it wasn't in any way boring, but I was thinking, here's a truck, here's 20 people, take them to Nairobi. Yeah, okay, I've
Mm.
been there, done that, I can do it again.
Okay.
So I think there was a certain level of ennui about it in that sense. But also, in hindsight, I think it might have been one of the places I started learning about learning, because the travelers on these trips, many of them would keep a diary, and I often asked them, "What are you writing in your diary?" And they'd be scribbling away each day.
Yes.
And some of them kept a diary when they were at home, or a journal.
Hmm.
And I said, "Did you write as much at home?" "Oh, no, never. I might write in it once a week, once every couple of weeks, because something different happened, and I'd write in my journal. Now I've got something different every day I have to deal with
Yeah.
when they're on these trips in these different countries and so on. And those those experiences were where learning was happening.
Hmm.
And they were, because they were encountering something new, they have to actually make decisions about how to handle that new thing.
Hmm. Yes.
And that's really interesting watching. And so I was watching people change as they went through, because some of the trips we did were like 4 months long.
Oh,
So you
wow.
actually got to know people quite well as individuals,
Hmm.
and you could watch them change from someone who was quite nervous at the beginning through to someone who's quite confident
Hmm.
in being with the group and being in a foreign place. And, we sort of picked them up at the airport in Nairobi, and the first night we'd be camping in the bush, and someone shake me awake at 2 o'clock in the morning. "I can hear lions." I said, "Yeah, I know. We're in Africa. What's the big deal?"
Gosh, yeah. And then by the last night, they were like sleeping with the lions.
I'm not sleeping with them. That would not be recommended. But
No, not recommended. Yeah, don't do that at home. Anyone?
yeah, yeah.
Wow. That is, yeah, 4 months spending time. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so then you were getting to a point, and obviously you are just like someone is seeking out new experiences the whole time. Like that's what I'm picking up here. Because that job is so fascinating, yet you were like, okay, I've done that now. Let's move on. So what did you move on to?
Fairly hard act to follow, and actually quite a few people who I knew who were doing that job didn't do so well when they kind of re-entered the real world, for want of a better way to put it, and had to go and get a job. I mean, I was lucky I had my degree, so I managed to go and get an engineering job and started working as an engineer, doing mechanical engineering, site management, and all sorts of things. And
Mm.
uh, so that kept me employed for a while, and then I got sick of that, so I went traveling again. From my,
Okay, and then so what? So how long were you there? And then you went traveling. What did you do then? Was it just traveling
yeah.
as a tourist,
Oh, no,
or did you work again?
no, just as a tourist, and
Okay.
worked a bit here and there. Ended up working on my cousin's fishing trawler for a while off
Mm.
Canada and
Mm.
stuff like that. So yeah,
Okay.
but eventually landed back in the UK and started getting a real job.
Okay. Okay. So
Um,
when you stopped doing the, I don't know, tour guide job, I don't know what to call it,
yeah,
then you moved to the UK.
yeah. I started. I had right of residency here because of British grandparents, so it enabled me to live here,
Mm.
and yeah, sort of got into proper jobs and started doing stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Then bored again, traveled again. Any
Well, a little bit
interesting
of that,
thing there?
but yeah, I've been in the UK fairly consistently since then, and
Okay.
worked for some. Ended up being director of a Nasdaq quoted multinational IT company, so I sort of did reasonably well, I guess, and
Mm.
then left there and started my own company, and that was 26 years ago now. So yeah,
Okay.
1999, I left there and started People Alchemy. Although it wasn't
Mm.
called that at the time, but
Yeah, and now we need to get into this because engineering, traveling, watching people, sort of learning how people learn just by observation, spending time with them, back to engineering, and now running something essentially in L&D. Like, tell us the journey because that seems, not many engineers are in L&D, so
so that's
tell
true
us that
enough.
journey.
It was I suppose, a happy accident in hindsight that I was working. I won't go to the full story. We don't really have time for that. But I ended up attending a training course and was actually, and I was there on a free ticket because of the training company had messed up basically. And I said, oh, well, I'll have it. I'll go and see what this is like. So I went along. And on lunch on the second day, the trainer said, "What are you doing here? You don't need this." Because it was a course on management. And I explained my situation that I was leaving the company that I was with and starting to look around. And he said, "Well, why don't you become a trainer and teach this stuff?" So that's what I did. So that was my introduction into L&D was that really.
Okay.
And that training company put me through a train the trainer course, and I
Mm.
then delivered their programs in the sort of management, business process reengineering, and some of those areas.
Mm.
I look back on what I was doing then in L&D in horror, actually, because it was an appalling way to go and try and deliver knowledge and training, and it was absolutely terrible. But that's how it was done back then, with
Yeah.
overhead projectors and acetates and hours in the classroom, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yes,
Um,
because I wanted to ask you, so what made it appalling?
It was just a pure jug and mug approach, really. You know, the assumption that they don't know anything, and then you just pour the knowledge into this empty mug.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and then you crack a lot of jokes and you make it entertaining so that you get happy 5 stars at the end of it, and then you get your bonus. So it was it was appalling in hindsight. There was nothing at all really about how are people going to behave afterwards. What are they going to do beyond it?
Mhm.
Occasionally, you might ask the question, well, what are you going to do with this stuff when you go back? But
Mhm.
Nobody cared. Nobody followed it up. There was no consequences for anybody not doing it. Um, it was just not very well done. And yet companies were spending huge amounts of money to send people on these training courses.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think it was there that I started to think there's something broken about it. But at that point, I was still very new, so I wasn't prepared to put my head above the parapet and say, this is wrong. I was getting paid money to go and do a thing. So I did the thing I was getting paid for, and the way they told me to do it was how I did it.
Yeah.
It's just that it wasn't very effective at all.
Mm. Mm.
And that's what sort of did start me on that journey of thinking about, well, how can you make changes in the learning and development? So I guess I tackled that more as an engineer, as an engineering problem, because
Mm.
quite frankly, the failure rate of that training was very high. And the fact that people would go back to their day job and they wouldn't change the way they were doing anything
Mhm.
as a result of being on a training course.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, this is broken. If I was an engineer and building a piece of farm machinery, it would break. It might even kill the person that bought it.
Mhm.
That's not a good look when.
Mhm.
So the failure rate to me was kind of unacceptable. I didn't quite know what to do about that. And that's kind of started that journey of looking into that. Well, where do we go from there? And then I started doing some training and some other stuff kind of on my own, not through this company, which meant I had a bit more leeway about how I did that.
Mhm.
And then got involved in other consultancy work and engineering, and it was a whole mishmash of different things, but started getting more and more focused on the learning side because I found it quite fascinating.
Mm, Okay, so I just love how you pulled those things together. The and it actually just makes so much sense to me. So I've never thought about it like this. So you've put a new idea into my head of that engineering, like looking at the failure rates, like that. Yes, like that just makes so much sense to me when I think about it like that with that lens. I mean, that's really amazing. So now I can see how you jumped, strong word, but moved from
I don't think it
engineering.
was that fast.
Hmm?
I
No,
don't
not
think it
that
was
fast. No. Yeah.
jumps fast. It was not
No.
that fast. It was a
Yes.
process over time,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
and started getting into doing different bits and pieces.
Hmm.
And one of the things that happened actually is I put a lot of work into the manuals that I would give out when I was doing training on a topic. And I remember visiting a company once, and the guy who had been one of my training courses, my manual was still as a folder was still sitting on his desk years later. And I thought, well, what's that doing there? And he said, it's the only one I keep of all the training courses I've ever done
Hmm. Hmm.
because there's useful information there that enables when I will go into it. And there were little sticky notes in it and things like that. So that was kind of what triggered me into thinking of a resource that people could refer to, and maybe, there was something that could be done in that region. So I started getting into that whole idea of performance support, informal learning. I wasn't using those words at the time. This is in hindsight.
Hmm.
And gathering together stuff that someone could then use in a situation where they're saying, help, I'm stuck. What do I do now? And that got me to that whole area of informal learning. And that ended up being the topic of my first book. And I actually built an online product around that, an information sort of encyclopedia thing,
Hmm.
which is past its sell by date now and is no longer on sale. But that was my first foray into online and digital stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that feeling, like seeing your manual there, you know that you've had some sort of
Yeah,
impact on at least that one person, which is
yeah,
all that, we can hope for. So that's
yeah, yeah.
okay. So I'm very glad you you saw your manual there, and then it led you down this path of books and software and all of the stuff. So yeah, so like, what did that part of your journey look like? Before you actually do that, there's a thought going on in my mind because you said that you had a conversation with one person that said, "Oh, why don't you do the training?" So obviously you were open to that as a possibility because, if someone came to me and said, "Oh, why don't you, run a finance department. I'm definitely not ever going to jump into that opportunity. So what made you jump? Like, if you just go back to that moment, what made you think, yeah, this is actually something I am interested in?
I, well, at the time, I was on the way out of that company. It was merging with somebody else. And I didn't like the new owners and so on and so forth. So I decided to leave anyway. So I guess at that point, I was looking around, and I was just curious.
Mm,
So for a while, that kept me amused. I was doing some training, and that it paid the rent. Um,
mm,
So that's really where I was at that
okay.
point, until I started building other stuff up and getting going. So,
Yes, yes. Okay. And then so how did your business, how was your business born?
um, on a beach in New Zealand, actually wandering about. But
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the name People Alchemy came from, because by that time, or many years earlier, I had done and was in the process of doing a whole bunch of training in NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and psychotherapy and hypnosis and so on. So I'm actually certified to do a lot of stuff in that area, including teach a lot of that stuff. So I wasn't keen to go and hang out a psychotherapist shingle and start doing that. That wasn't what I wanted. I just found it all fascinating.
Mm,
But that got me interested in how people work, what goes on in the mind, and because of the training I was doing at that time, that got me interested in the learning side of it. So that's kind of where my focus ended up going, and thinking, well, how can we do better than the failure rate, that
mm,
we were getting?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that kind of provided a direction of travel into uh, the sort of work I was doing in terms of consultancy and coaching. So I did a reasonable amount of senior executive coaching with
Mm.
that background I had of operating in business. And I didn't tell them I used to wander around the desert in my shorts, but that wasn't. They
Well,
just knew I'd been a director of a decent sized company, and I had so that was intriguing. And again, it was all sort of learning and finding out what worked, what didn't.
yeah. Okay. So now we've gone from the beginning, helping your neighbor's farm, all the way to creating your business. During that time, what was one of the toughest challenges you faced personally in your career? And just talk us through that, and then the follow-up question will be, how did you get through that? Like, what got you through that?
Um, I suppose the toughest thing, well, a very tough thing was getting charged by a silverback gorilla in Uganda, and what got me through it was staying still.
Okay.
Because
Wow.
I was told to, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's a bit, but it's true. But
Yeah. That,
and
I mean,
the gorilla by
I
the
don't think I would be here to tell that story. I'm gonna be honest.
and the name of the silverback, by the way, was Mushamuka, and that was his. He was one of the. But it was anyway.
Oh,
So it. Um, but in terms of business, what tough? I don't know. I mean, I there were times when I had people working with me, whether I could, make payroll, as it were, whether they were subcontractors or whatever. There was, times when you sort of look at the bank account and thinking, well, unless something happens in the next 24 hours, I'm toast.
mm,
Um, and yeah, so those are tough times. You've kind of got to hold the faith a little bit. And also just being, sometimes you just feel, well, where do I go from here? And then you got to look back, well, what's the general direction of travel? For me, it's not so much some big goal. I don't look forward and thinking, oh, I'm going to go and do this. I don't have those kind of big visions. And I don't think of it as a career as such. It's just life. You live it, you get on with it. For me, there tends to be a direction of travel, something I'm interested in, I'm working, and then stuff unfolds as you go along.
mhm.
And if you tried to manage that to happen, you never could. So a lot of it is about, I think, just taking advantage of what emerges, but that also means you've got to be able to notice what emerges. And too many people get focused on a specific outcome they want. I want that XYZ or whatever it is. And in being so focused on that, they can lose sight of the other doors that open alongside the corridor they're in.
Hmm.
So you do have to be aware of these other doors that open. And then you can make a decision as to whether you do it. So for me, it's much more about a direction of travel, a direction of interest, a direction of that looks interesting, I'm going to go there, or that doesn't look, or what does it feel like? And I do the same thing with clients, for clients, and I talk to a client, I said, I'm, not feeling good about that. I'll walk away. Some people will just any client, any price, whatever. And I think, well, no, I'm going to live with myself as well. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And that's very
that's
tough.
that's tough when you're broke, as
Yes,
well.
yes.
But um, so I think, yeah. So tough times. I think it's always, well, what's the direction of travel, and what small step can I take today that
Mm,
will move me in that direction, no matter how small. And of course, if you move, then things change.
yeah.
And if you move again tomorrow by another half an inch, it changes again. And tomorrow, another half an inch. I mean,
Mm,
it doesn't sound like much, but over the course of a couple of weeks, you've moved a foot, and that changes things.
mm, mm,
And then if you notice and you're aware, and I think also people are more willing to help someone who is clearly keen to keep moving.
mm,
If people sit on their hands and say, I'm stuck, help me, yes, I'll lend a hand, but actually, generally, I tend to think, well, hang on, keep moving, and then I'll help you,
mhm, mhm.
you know, because otherwise you ended up doing for people, not with people, or, so
Yes,
that's a
yes.
big difference.
Yeah.
And I love helping others, and sort of saying, well, this worked for me, it might work for you,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, kind of paying it forward because I got help as well. I certainly didn't do it alone. I had a lot of help from a lot of different people.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such the word that's coming to mind is comforting point of view, or a comforting way to look at it, because I think a lot of people, they feel like it's so big, like to make this move is so big, even a career that they're miserable in, and they want another company or another position or whatever it is, or promotion, or like I'm now running my own business, and that's how we met. You helped me, you connected me with some people, and but it feels like in the moment, and I understand that payroll thing, sometimes it's just, paying me. I've gone many months without paying myself because I'm like putting it
Yeah,
all back into the business. And so that is like, yeah, it's comforting just to think like, just take the next step, just take the next step. And if you're
yeah,
on the right path, or at least the right general direction, that it'll work out. So yeah, so to me, that is extremely
yeah,
comforting.
yeah,
It's a lovely way of thinking through that.
yeah.
I
Some people do very well when they have a big goal in front of them, and it's
mm,
for me that doesn't tend to work. I'm not that goal oriented in a sense. So people are different,
hmm.
and
Yes.
I'm quite happy with that direction of travel, and saying, well, I'm enjoying these things. Let's keep doing them.
Mm,
I did a wonderful exercise once, and I'd recommend it. And I don't know where it came from. I learned it in a self-development course, and it was no doubt picked up by whoever was teaching that course by others. But look back through your life and divide it up into little segments of probably a year, 2 years at maximum. And at points where there was a change, you changed job, you moved to university, something happened where there was like a change. And then with appropriate glass in hand of whatever's your favorite, drink, is just reflect on those periods over a few weeks. Reflect on those periods of your life and say, during that particular period, what was it that happened to me or that I did that really felt like I was here on purpose, felt like the universe is just working. There's plenty of juice here. It's worth the squeeze, however you want to describe that. And there may be periods in your life where there was nothing, just desert, no juice. there were other periods where you had lots of things and you might have felt the juice for 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 days. It doesn't really matter, but
Mhm.
make a note of all of those things where you felt the juice was worth the squeeze in life. And then look for the common thread in that. And it's really interesting exercise to do. And sometimes it won't be till even weeks later you suddenly think, oh, I know what it was.
Mhm.
For me, it was when I'm teaching someone, when I'm working with them to do something, and that might have been helping them rebuild their motorbike or something, because I'm a mechanical and engineer, or teaching them how to light a fire with wet wood in the middle of the Zaire jungle. But
Mhm.
it was teaching. It was helping people do something they were previously unable to do, and that got them excited to be able to do it. So that's one of the things that kind of takes me forward, and it's the litmus test I can then use for any decision I've got to make about a business deal or some job or a contract or a project or almost anything is, does this resonate with that juice that I remember?
Mhm. Love that. Yes, I'm definitely going to do that myself.
Yeah.
This seems like a great moment to ask you because, yeah, that was such a good share. To go all the way back now to your younger self, wherever you want to go back to, what is the number one thing you would thank yourself for doing?
Um, I think probably going back to university, because I did 2 years when I left school and then I disappeared. I didn't really like it very much. Maybe I was too young or whatever. I don't know.
Mm,
And spent 4 years doing different jobs, uh, everything from farm laborer to working in factories to doing all sorts. And then a change happened, and I decided to go back to university, and that's when I got my degree. And it's not that I really use my degree now per se, but it gave me the ability to, a lot of things outside of the knowledge base. It gave me a lot of other things in life which I have used and am grateful for.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
so yeah, so that would be the thing I would go back and thank my younger self for
mm,
doing, I think.
mm.
Because I
Yeah,
could have just kept carrying on as a laborer as such.
yeah. Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah, so that was really a pivotal moment for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally get that. Awesome. One more question before we just wrap up to say, how people can get hold of you, work with you, what they can reach out to you for. But I love asking this question of what is something that we're not speaking about enough when it comes to building a career, building a life. It's very interwoven. To me, it's very interwoven, right? You spend so much of your time in your career, you may as well love it. But so, what is just one thing, in your opinion, that we're not speaking enough about?
I haven't really given that any thought. I mean, you made the point about it comes back to what they sometimes call work-life balance, which I think is a crazy term because it's life. It's about a life balance.
Mhm.
Is your life balanced in a way that works for you? And of course, for some people, that's going to involve a lot of work, and others it might involve less of that and doing other things and hobbies and so on. So it's, are you doing the things that you get juice from?
Mhm.
Or are you tolerating life and not getting any juice? But of
Mhm.
course, in order to move towards something that's going to give you the juice of life or whatever, however you want to describe it, you've got to know what that is, which is why that exercise that I talked about is really quite valuable because it will help you discover within yourself just what it is that makes me feel I'm on this planet for a genuine reason
Mhm.
rather than just being here and so what, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I love that. I am, like I said, definitely going to do that exercise, and I hope everyone does that exercise because I really feel like you may as well love what you're doing. You may as well love your work, like the money,
Yeah.
absolutely. We need it to survive, but
Yeah.
yeah, just to do anything for the money or, yeah, like paying the rent or something like that is just like, no, there's so much more to life. So I love that.
What I do see sometimes is people, because they can do something, think they should do it, and that's just not how it should work. It's there's lots of things people can do,
Mm,
um, but that doesn't mean they should be doing those things.
definitely. Okay, Paul, it has been so awesome chatting with you. Thank you again. Let everyone know how they can work with you, get in touch with you, tell us all the things.
Well, we didn't really get into any of the stuff I'm kind of focused on and doing
Yeah.
these days,
Yeah.
the research and whatever, but and that's fine. It's been interesting. And so my website, the company website for the software that we do is peoplealchemy.com. And my personal website, which has the books and other stuff, is paul-matthews.com. Two T's in Matthews, by the way. Anybody with one, I think, is missing something important in their life. So, um, and yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so if people want to find me there, and I'm always happy to have a chat about learning and development, L&D strategy, or anything like that, particularly where it involves getting people to change the way they're doing things. So it's that behavior change, really, and then how you can do that, and more importantly, how you can do it at scale in an organization. Because if you can't do it, it's easy enough to do it for one-on-one or with coaching and things like that, but how do you do it at scale? And
Mhm.
that means we're heading into technology. So that's kind of where we're at,
Yes,
is
yes.
all of that.
And
Yeah.
that's so, yeah, tell us a little bit about, that's your business and what your business does, right?
Yeah, well, I do the consultancy stuff around L&D and things as well, but now but yeah, we've got a software platform which is focused on sort of learning workflows and how you can utilize those in an ongoing way to develop behavior change and actually generate impact out
Yeah.
of your learning initiatives rather than deliver a training and then cross your fingers and hope that some magic happens. And I'm afraid I haven't seen a pixie dust dealer in a long time, so there's no pixie dust available anymore to
No.
make training courses magically work.
Hmm.
So there's a bunch of stuff you've got to wrap around a training course in order for it to have an impact out there. And that's kind of where we specialize is how do you put all the stuff and wrapping around the kind of training initiatives
Mm, mm, yeah,
and then getting to the point where there is an impact that is measurable.
yeah.
And also defining the impact up front. So there's a whole process of how do you even start that process of thinking, well, what do we want them doing differently? And then how do we measure it? And then
Mm,
how do we deliver those behaviors rather than how do we deliver a bunch of content? If
yeah.
you start thinking, how do we deliver those behaviors that we know are the good ones that we need to execute our strategy? Then you start thinking differently about how you might design a program to deliver behaviors as opposed to how you would design a program to deliver a curriculum.
Oh, yes.
Huge difference.
Yes,
I
yes. Massive,
about
massive difference. And honestly, just that mindset shift will make a
yeah.
huge difference. Yeah. So Paul, I could again chat to you all day. This has been so nice, and it was so nice getting to know a little bit more about you and your journey and your life. It's been absolutely fascinating. So, thank you so much. We'll absolutely add all your links to the description, and people must get in touch with you.
Okay. Thanks so much. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.